Hey guys, welcome back. This is episode 17 of my real estate investing series. And in this episode, we are talking all about home inspections and building inspections in New York City. And this episode, we do have a guest on the show. I have an inspector with us here for you guys today. So stay tuned. We're covering everything here. Welcome back, guys. I do have a special guest on with me today. I will bring him in momentarily. His name is Peter Panagopoulos, and he is a home inspector and engineer at Pantech Engineering, and he has agreed to come onto the show today and talk to you guys about everything there is to know about New York City inspections. We have a lot of questions that are going to be answered in this episode. And of course, at the end of the episode, if you still have any outstanding questions, feel free to message me separately and we'll get your question answered. Really quick before we jump in, I really just wanted to urge you to subscribe to this channel if you find this content useful. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. And please also follow me on Instagram. My handle is Downtown Native. That's just another place where we can connect and get to know each other better. So I'm gonna bring in Peter now, and this is being recorded via Zoom. So the video will look a little bit different once I bring Peter in if you're watching on YouTube, but let me bring in Peter now. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Christina.
How's it going? How are you doing?
Always good.
Good, awesome. So this is really exciting because this is the first time I've ever had a guest on the show. So Peter is a home inspector and engineer at Pantech Engineering, and he also has a background in construction. So I thought that he would be the most appropriate guest to talk to you guys about everything that you need to know about the home inspection process, when to have a home inspection done, and ultimately what to make of your home inspection. So with that intro, I will let Peter just give us a little bit of info on what he does and what his company is, and then we'll get into our questions.
Pantech Engineering, we do any type of inspection needed for a real estate sales transaction for condos, co-ops, commercial buildings, regular homes, townhouses. And on top of that, we also do structural inspections. A lot of times you might do a home inspection and the home inspector will write on the report, refer to a structural engineer. So we could come and do that inspection for you as well. We also do a lot of structural repair work, structural design work. We do construction management for renovation projects. We also do exterior facade design, like if you're having issues with the outside of your building, with the brickwork, or you have water infiltration, we do that as well. We'd like to have all the answers. So like, even if it isn't something that we do, we'll be able to connect you with the right person that you need to talk with.
Yeah, and that's why I love recommending you to my clients as well, because I feel that they really do feel like you're very knowledgeable in what you do. I love that you have knowledge of every side of what needs to happen in a home. It's such a peace of mind thing to have, like definitely such an asset. We have some questions for you, Peter. And at the end, you'll tell us the craziest thing you've ever seen on an inspection, which I'm really excited to hear. I love crazy stories. So we can jump right in with our first question. And this is the question that pretty much like 100% of people will have when they're thinking about having an inspection done. And just to set the stage so you guys, the listeners here, understand, an inspection is something that a buyer is responsible for doing. So really, a seller doesn't have to tell you the entire life history of the property. So you really want to make sure as a buyer that you are doing your own research and that you are looking very analytically at a property before you purchase it, obviously, to make sure that if there are any physical defects, that you can have it addressed before you commit to purchasing the property. So that is 100% the buyer's responsibility, and it is also the buyer's expense. So that said, Peter, what do you charge for an inspection, and what do your typical inspections include?
So for a co-op or a condo inspection, we charge $350. For a regular size home, $550. It's like a really big house with like a lot of bathrooms. It's usually like $700. 2-3 family buildings are around that as well, $700, $800. Smaller apartment buildings, if it's like a 6-unit apartment building, it's about 1,200.
Cool.
Just for our structural inspections, run about between 600 and 900.
And that's when you're assessing the integrity of the building itself, right?
That's like when somebody actually calls us and is like, there's a problem that another inspector saw,
Okay.
or, we're sure this building has like a big structural issue. We want you to like fully assess the structure.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. And then what does a typical inspection include? What are the main things you're looking at?
So during the inspection, we try to look at all the systems as thoroughly as we can. We do a visual inspection of whatever we could see. Then we make sure like the heating, plumbing, electrical is all good. We usually open up the panel to see the wiring in the panel. Like you can't see the wiring when it's in the walls, but all that wiring eventually goes to the panel. So once you open it up, you could see what type of wires the house has. Like if it's aluminum wiring or if it's cloth wiring, or if everything's okay.
Cool. As far as what you said, you what's behind the walls you can't see, but you do have tools to assess. Let's say you're able to detect if there's water in the walls or if there was a leak in the walls.
Yeah, inspectors do have types of tools that could look behind walls a little bit, but it's never 100%. But our inspections do include a termite report. We do have thermal imaging guns, so that kind of could give us like an idea of what's behind certain walls, if there's like cold air coming in, or if there's missing insulation, or some water coming in. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
And also, since we're all engineers at Pantech, when we get hired to do a regular home inspection, we're kind of also getting a structural inspection. Like we're never gonna say on our report refer to a structural engineer. If it arises, like we'll have it on the report and we can let you know how bad it is or if it's not an issue at all.
Cool. Awesome. Most of the time you would also be sure to access the mechanical rooms in the buildings and possibly even the roof.
Yeah, I definitely want to always check out the roof of a structure.
Cool. I just thought I want to see if there's a way that I can. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to adjust so that we're the same size. And I think that's a lot better. Okay, so that all makes sense. And for our next question, what is the most common issue that you find in a New York City inspection?
So kitchens and bathrooms now are supposed to have these GFCI outlets that help you not get electrocuted if something occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't always mandatory. And as the years go on, they made more areas needed. So now every outlet in the bathrooms need it. Kitchens, they want it on all of them. The garage needs them now. Outside needs them. And the whole thing with that is, let's say you have a house that was from the 1920s and there was no GFCI back then. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need to have one by code, unless if you renovated a kitchen, then you have to bring it up to code. But if it's like a kitchen that's been renovated, then by code, it's okay if there's no GFCIs, but I tell all my clients it's better to just replace them. It's not that expensive of a fix.
Right.
Safety issue.
Yeah.
Why not just do it? It doesn't cost that much to upgrade.
Exactly. And that's why also for our listeners, if you are buying an apartment in an older co-op or condo building, many times if the updates like Peter just mentioned haven't been made already by the previous owner, then their renovation policy might very well include the rule that if you are going to make updates in the kitchen or the bathroom, for example, then at that time you are required to upgrade the electric to be up to the current code. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not like an imminent emergency, but something that you'll need to know for the future.
Then another issue is exhaust fans. You're supposed to have an exhaust fan in bathrooms and kitchens. Now, it's not a big issue, but I just like to let the clients know, hey, this bathroom doesn't have an exhaust fan. A lot of people, when they're buying a place, they don't even notice that there's no exhaust fan. And then they move in and we're like, oh, the kitchen has no exhaust fan. Another issue is with flashing that I see a lot. Pretty much anywhere where roofing material joins up against any other material like brick or cement or concrete, or siding, you're supposed to be some kind of flashing.
What's flashing?
So wherever the roofing adjoins anything else, any other material, it should be flashing around. And it's usually made out of metal. Or like, let's say if there's a pipes coming out of the roof of the building, you're supposed to have flashing around. Or if it's like the opening you use to access, that should all be flashed. So
does it like prevent leaks or something?
That's why it's a big issue, because typically when water does leak in, that's like where it leaks in from.
Okay, got it. Interesting.
And there's a lot of
buildings don't have that.
A lot of buildings just they were flashed incorrectly, or they were kind of, like a faster way that was just cheaper to do. That's not like super watertight. So I always have to put on the report like, hey, this is flashed, but it's kind of not done like the best way.
Interesting.
And then another issue that comes up a lot is just like the sloped floors and leaning staircases, like a lot of.
So common.
So
but are those urgent issues?
it depends on how sloped the floor is. Typically, some sloping's okay, or if like your staircase is leaning a little bit. It is New York. The buildings are really old. It could be leaning a little bit, but it could have been like that for like 40 years already, and it hasn't moved.
Right.
You just want to make sure it's an issue that isn't going to get worse.
Got it. And you're able to tell if it's going to get worse?
You can't always tell, but you could.
Like there are signs?
Yeah.
Cool. And that's why it's important to have you look at it. So what's a problem that people may not think is serious, but might actually surprisingly be more of a fix than what you'd estimate?
So this kind of goes back to the sloped floors that we were just talking about. If this floors is just sloped a little bit, you could kind of redo the flooring on the top and just make it even. But if it could be a big issue and all your floor beams are sagging, and the sloping may get worse over time. So depending on if it's just a small slope and it's been like that for a while, it probably won't get worse. Unless you put like additional weight on it. Like some of them, the fix is just evening out the floor above, but if it's really sloped, and that could be an actual big structural issue, and you want to get those fixed, it could be
really costly.
Other few issues are a wet basement. If you have water coming into your basement through cracks, it could be a lot of money to fix that issue. Some water is okay, but if you have like cracks that you could see and water is coming, like every time it rains, you're having a lot of water coming. That's another pretty costly situation to fix. If you have water infiltration around like windows, you have like a brick building and it's not just one window and it's multiple windows, it could be a pretty costly repair. And if your electrical wiring is like really old and hasn't been updated at all, that also could be a costly fix, especially like if you're trying to add a lot of HVAC units or a lot of extra electrical that the building didn't have. So it may take like upgrading the whole system. If the wiring's really old, you may have to like redo all the wire.
Yeah.
If you want to just change your panel, if you have like an old panel, and you want to just put a newer one, that's not too pricey. But if you need to put like new outlets everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes buildings with old electrical systems won't allow certain equipment to be installed in the unit. So sometimes they won't let you add the HVAC, or you can't add a washer dryer hookup because it would be too much on the existing electrical system, and the only solution would be for the entire building to upgrade their electrical system. So that's a good point.
Yeah, or if you see like if all the outlets are those two-prong outlets where we don't even have like a ground, and talking about like you may have to like upgrade everything. Like I've seen people plug in refrigerators, which takes like a lot of power, into like they'll get like a converter to convert it into the two-prong.
And that's a bad idea?
Yeah, that's just like things like refrigerators or dryers or that are using a lot of energy, should have a ground.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
That's for that question. That's pretty much.
Yeah, very thorough answer. Okay, for our next question, are there any typical issues that tend to come up a lot in an inspection report that alarm purchasers that actually are not that big of a problem?
Yeah, a lot of times, anytime anybody sees like a crack in concrete or like plaster cracks, they think there's like a big structural issue. Like there's cracks, they're like, oh, there must be something wrong. Uh, so just to talk about concrete first, a lot of time, just the nature of the material concrete, it cracks. Like from the moment that you pour it, it starts to shrink. And as it shrinks, it causes some cracks. So like you could have a new foundation and it'll have like hairline cracks from literally the day that, poured.
Wow.
So typically, and over time it shrinks and just temperature differences, make it crack. But it really depends on what the crack looks like. A lot of times it's just like a hairline crack. And even if it's a long one, if it's like very thin, like it probably isn't an issue. When you're really dealing with like concrete cracks that you should be worried about, it's like if they're really big or if they start opening up towards the top, or if you have actual water coming in. If you have water coming in through the cracks, then that means like it's a full crack through your foundation wall. And so but typically usually when I look somebody calls me for concrete cracks, it's not as sometimes it is bad, but typically it just needs to be like patched.
Got it.
And same thing with plaster cracks. If you have a plaster home, the plaster's probably been there for a long time. And that same thing when, with the change of seasons, it shrinks, expands. And as it does that over time, some cracking could form, but you just need to get them repaired. Again,
No.
with the plaster, if it's like a really big crack, then it could mean you have an underlying structural issue. But if it's on the smaller side, it usually doesn't end up being a big issue.
Good to know. Thank you. Moving on, our next question is, what are you looking for exactly when you go up to the roof and down to the basement and examine a building?
The roof is the less complex one. You check the whole roof to see if there's anywhere water could potentially get into the building, this goes back to like the flashing we were talking about. So I check all the flashing really good. Anywhere where like the roofing material meets with other strips of roofing material, like those seams,
Mm-hmm.
water, like if there's any kind of crack or seam open, it'll eventually make its way in. And sometimes the seams or the cracks like a little higher up, so if it just rains a little bit, you don't get any water because the water level doesn't get up to the crack or the opening. But let's say you have a huge rainstorm and you have a lot of rain on your roof, or for some reason your gutter is clogged and you have all this water on your roof, then it could make its way into the seam. So I just check for any opening or somewhere I see like, okay, maybe it's not open now, but it looks like something needs to be fixed soon.
Got it.
So that's for a roof. The basement is during my inspection, especially like for a home, I spend most of the time in the basement. The basement is where you usually have most of the utilities, the water meter coming in, the gas lines coming in. So when I go to the basement, I'm checking all the MEP stuff, the mechanical, plumbing, boilers, and I definitely check the foundation, which is sometimes hard because if it's like a finished basement, you can't really see all the foundation. Typically the boiler room, maybe the foundation wall's not closed up in the boiler room, so you could use that as like a judge. If you're having issues in that one little piece of foundation wall in the boiler room that you could see, then maybe that issue is spread across everywhere else. Or if that section is looking okay, maybe the rest isn't so bad. Another thing, when I'm in the basement, that's when I like judge the whole structure. Like I get to see the foundation walls, I get to see the bearing walls. Typically, if your building has like a bearing wall in the middle of it, which a lot do, you'll have one in the basement and you'll have one on the first floor right on top of it, and then on the second floor. So looking at the basement, I kind of could figure out like which way since the upper floors are always, the ceilings are closed, and in the basement sometimes it's open, or at least I could get maybe a little view in like the boiler room. I could see what size like the beams of the building are, how they attach to the outside walls, there's columns, and kind of get like an overall picture of the structure as a whole.
Excellent. Excellent answer. Thank you so much for how thorough that was.
My inspections are as thorough as my answers are.
We have a really good list of questions here, honestly. I'm like even more impressed with the questions that we put together now that we're going through it now. Okay. For our next question, are there things that you look for that are different, whether you're looking at a co-op or a condo building versus a private home?
So not necessarily. Anything I'm checking in the condo, the private home. The one thing I would say is, where condos or co-ops are a little different, is sometimes the clients want me to look at like the overall building, to see like if they're worried about their assessments going up in the future. So sometimes they want me to like look at like bigger systems like boilers that feed the whole building. Also to bring up what we were talking about before we started with these boutique condo setups where there's only a few owners, and if there's a big problem, then you may have to pay a lot of money to fix it. So
right, smaller buildings like maybe a 4 or 5 unit condo or co-op, any issues that come up with that building are spread over the 4 or 5 unit owners within that building. Whereas in huge complexes, you may be able to take a costly expense and divide it up among maybe 400 unit owners and incur less of a cost. So of course, with the smaller townhouses or boutique condos and co-ops, they're beautiful and they have their pros, but also, a little bit more responsibility when it comes to potentially having to pitch in for a repair.
Yeah, and if the building was built like a while ago and there has already been people living in them and there hasn't been so many issues, maybe not too many issues would arise, new issues. I'm more worried about like when clients come up to call me up if they're buying into like a newly constructed boutique condo, and then I tell them they should need to do like a very thorough inspection of not just their unit, like the building in its entirety, like a thorough one, the roof, exterior.
Yeah. I tell my clients a lot that when you're buying into a new development building, sometimes it's like buying the new iPhone model. Sometimes there are bugs that they do need to sort out in the beginning when they first get the building up and running. Usually those issues are easily fixable and not too much to worry about, but of course there is always the chance that there could be a major issue with the structure of a new development building.
Yeah, but if it's a bigger building, hopefully there's less chances of an issue. When I get really worried, like I said, is like these smaller boutique condos where it's just like 4 or 8 units.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk briefly about water damage, leaks. You see water coming into a unit. When are we really concerned, like this is a major issue, and when is it something that you think is something that can be easily sorted out? Is there a way that you can tell, and what's really the range of what could be wrong?
So I would say anytime you have an active leak is an issue that you should take care of right away. If you have a leak, then you have water behind your walls, and that could, cause a mold issue. So getting to the bottom of what's causing a leak is first priority. If you have some kind of leak, it's either coming in from water from the outside or you're having some kind of piping leak. First step is trying to figure out if it's a pipe or if it's coming from the outside. Usually if it's coming from the outside, it'll be on one of the exterior walls or on the ceiling of the top floor. If you have a leak in the middle of your ceiling of your house, it's probably not from the roof. So you got to just try to figure out what it is first and handle it like that. If you're on the top floor and there's a leak, it's from the roof. That's usually easy to fix. Like you get on the roof, you find out what little hole it's coming from, and you patch it up. and then fix the roof further down the line. If you have water coming in from your walls, then it gets a little trickier because you don't know exactly where it's coming from. If there's some kind of leak on an exterior wall, sometimes it takes some more investigating to actually figure out what the issue is. So a lot of times people correct the actual leak issue, but never fix like the interior of the building. So like we'll have roof leaks, we'll fix the roof leak, but we'll never fix the ceiling in the inside. So you still have like a huge water stain on the roof, and somebody automatically is going to think, oh, there's a leak.
Right.
A lot of times I'll just go up to the roof and it'll be like a brand new roof. It's like, okay, there is no more leak. They just never fixed the wall.
Got it. So being able to have your inspector decipher between an old leak that has been since fixed and a new active issue is important.
Then a lot of the leaks are going to be by the kitchens or the bathrooms. So like if you have a leak in your bathroom, like the ceiling, it must be from the bathroom upstairs. Or same thing, if you have water in your kitchen, it's coming from the kitchen upstairs. If you have some water in some other part of your house, then it's a little more worrisome.
Got it.
If you have water leaking into your kitchen, it could just be as easy as the person upstairs needs to fix their drain pipe.
Okay. So seeing water is not always a cause for panic. It's really making sure that you are able to identify the source and fix the source of the problem.
Yes.
Awesome. How do you spot water damage?
The 3 signs of water damage would be stains. If you have like brown stains on your ceiling or on the sheetrock or on the plaster. Another sign of water damage is if you have some kind of mold, like surface mold on any material, then there's probably water coming in from somewhere. Those are the 2 main signs that you typically would see. The other one is this thing called efflorence. It happens with concrete and bricks. Concrete and bricks, they're porous materials. They stop water, but water does kind of go through the pores and make its way onto the other side. If you have a foundation that's concrete or brick, the water from the outside does get in. The water isn't leaking in through holes in the wall. It's just making its way through. So when the water does come through like that, it brings minerals to the surface that were in the concrete or the brick, and that's the white powder that you get. If you're looking at a building that's made out of brick, and you have this white powder on the outside, that means there's some kind of water issue, because that means there's water in back of the brick in the wall, and it's making its way out to the outside because the sun's hitting it, so the water's going that way. And that's, if you see that, then there's some kind of water issue.
Interesting.
Efflorence in your foundation walls is okay if it's just a little bit, but if you have like a lot of this powder and it's like all over the place, then you may have a bigger issue.
That's something I've seen less of.
Yeah, that you'll see more on like older brick buildings or old foundations.
Good to know. And would you say that you tend to find more issues? Typically, of course, it's a generalization, but would you say that you tend to find more issues in newer buildings or in older buildings?
I would say you find issues in both. You just find different issues with both of them. So like the older buildings, the buildings are a little less complex. So there's just less issues to find. Like we were talking about, the slope floors is something a lot with the older homes, or the old electrical wiring is something that I see a lot. But newer homes also tend to have a lot of issues. A lot of people think like, oh, this house is on the newer side, I won't have that many issues. But I would say that's not true. They used to build stuff like very strong back in the days, and over time these buildings are still holding up pretty well.
Yeah.
The newer buildings just have a lot more different systems, like HVAC systems, sprinkler systems. Also, a lot of materials have changed recently, so a lot of like the older contractors aren't like super familiar with working with the newer systems. Sometimes you see some really weird stuff done, even in new building.
Would you say that in newer buildings they're like cutting corners, or is it just like innocent like changes in the way they do things?
There's definitely some corner cutting, but there's also just like a lot of just people that just are the actual people doing the work, but just don't know how to do it properly.
Wow, that's pretty horrifying.
Yeah, so so a lot of things do come up with newer buildings as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just, it's not to say that it's not safe to buy a newer building, but it's definitely smart to not assume that just because you're buying new, that it means that you can pass up having a professional inspector look at it. You just want to be just as careful, if not more careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times the older buildings, let's say it is sloped a little bit, we're saying but the building's been there for 100 years, then it probably may not get worse. So that's all taking it into account.
Yeah. And that's something too, that when we do the due diligence process, it's not an inspection item. Obviously, this is what we do and the attorney does while we are analyzing whether an apartment is a good, solid purchase, is we will look back at the board meeting minutes and we will look back at previous assessment history to see if there were, conversations about issues that have occurred in the past or reasons that the building had to assess unit owners, which is essentially charging them a fee in addition to their maintenance to raise money for a repair. And, in the older buildings, you can get a really good idea of whether the building is a well-oiled machine by seeing that track record. And, when you do the due diligence, you hope to see good, solid results there as far as they don't have to assess every single year for problems. You can kind of see that the building has a good record as far as what they've had to raise money for and things of that nature. So that's a really good point. Whereas, in the brand new buildings, you don't have a track record yet. So exactly. What we do is, a lot of times too, my buyers will look at the developer, previous projects that the developer has done, and if they've been proven to be buildings that have been successful.
Yeah, I would definitely look in, like you said, seeing the history of the developer is also crucial to look into buildings.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Is there ever a circumstance where you would say that having an inspection is not necessary?
I would say, if you're investing all this money in a property, sometimes it's like all your savings. The cost for an inspection is definitely always worth it, and I recommend always getting it done. If it's a co-op that's like really large and has a good track record on the financials and everything, and seems like everything is up to date, then maybe not if it's a co-op, but any other property, I would say 100% get an inspection.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really great answer. Honestly, I feel like that's what I typically tell my clients too. Sometimes if the building has rock solid financials and we feel like even if something did come up, that the building has so much money in reserves that they can cover it without even assessing unit owners, that's one thing. You can get away with not having the inspection, but really the inspection is usually such a minimal nominal expense, and it gives you such peace of mind that I tend to just recommend having it done with a trustworthy and reputable person that can actually point you in the direction of, what really is worth worrying about and what to do if there is a problem that comes up. So I think that answer was really spot on. So let's say that there's a buyer who really just doesn't want to spring for the money that it takes for it to have the inspection done, or for whatever reason they choose that they feel like they don't need it. Is there anything that you would really recommend? Like, what are the most important things that you recommend us, you know, the purchaser and their real estate agent, like as they're looking at the property, what should we really be looking for to make sure that we at least do the best that we can at identifying any potential problems that can be seen with the naked eye?
I would say this probably would go back to what we were talking about with water infiltration. You have, if you see water coming in from like the exterior walls or the foundation or like the roof, that would be like, especially if it's the exterior walls, because if you have water coming in, and who knows, depending on what the situation is, it could be like a little water coming in for like years. If it's a small opening, but that water over time could be, you know, creating mold in the back of the walls or rotting away wood. So definitely keep an eye like on openings, and like if you anywhere there's some kind of opening on the outside of the building that doesn't look like it's sealed properly, water is getting in, most likely. So it's important to not only definitely check the inside, but also check the outside and be like, oh, that looks like somewhere water could be coming in from.
Smart. Smart. So like water is really the most significant thing that we would be able to see without the aid of a professional.
Yeah, and again, you know, this goes back to our other questions, like what could be if you walk into a place and the floors are like really sloped, then you know maybe you should get like a professional to come check it out, even if you weren't originally thinking like you were wanting a home inspector.
Yeah. Like if you can see a sloped floor with the naked eye, you're saying,
Yeah.
then it might be problematic.
Yeah, then you should definitely get an inspector if you're getting like a townhouse.
Yeah, good point. That's awesome. Thank you. And now for the last question, what is the craziest thing you've ever seen while doing an inspection?
Craziest thing I've seen was somebody had called me up for we were buying a commercial building, and it was like a deli with a office on the first floor and apartments on the upper two floors. And I went into the basement, and it looked like the first floor, a portion of the first floor was about to collapse. Like there was 6 beams that were all cracked, and it looked like somebody had done a repair to try to like fix it, but the repair had also cracked itself. So it was like we need to get out of here, and we need to
We need to get out of here.
get out of here, and you gotta like get somebody the same day or the day after to shore it up and get this repair work done. But that uh,
Wow.
definitely did not that was not good for the deal. The deal actually fell through for that one.
Yeah. Wow. 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 That's
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
that was a big one, and then you know just the occasional dried up rat that falls on my head when opening up a ceiling.
Stop. Are you serious?
Yeah, you know, it happens sometimes.
That's crazy. I've never seen that.
But yeah, like sometimes they're like so old they look like you can't even tell that it was like an even a rat anymore at some point. Like it's so dried up.
Stop. I'm freaking out. That is so gross. If a rat fell out of a ceiling, I would probably have a heart attack. I don't know how I would be able to justify. I mean, obviously, that's not a reason to not buy the property, but I would freak. I would surely freak if that ever
I
occurred.
just tell myself like, oh yeah, it's been dead for like probably 10 years now. So
Whenever we find like, sometimes there will be like in some apartments, sometimes there'll be like a dead like roach, like a huge dead like roach or something. And it's so gross. But I'm like, a lot of times, yeah, like if there's bugs in the building, like it's not ideal. But it's like if it's dead, it's been exterminated. And that's why like when the building gets exterminated, the bugs like come out and die. So at least you know that it's been addressed. Like you don't want like live roaches or rats like in your home though. That's disgusting.
Yeah, and always, if you have some kind of issue like that, figure out where they're coming in from, and you just seal the holes with some caulk or some foam. So
Yeah.
there's always a solution.
So if there is like a rodent infestation in a building, is it really just a matter of like making sure that your unit is protected from it entering, or is it like more of a problem than that? I mean, it is New York. So
Yeah,
like I feel like a majority of buildings in New York do have the problem.
yeah.
So
I would
is
say,
it a problem or is it just
I would say you don't want it in your immediate living space.
yeah, for sure. I've never I don't want to say this and like jinx it, but like I've never had any bugs or rats like ever in any building I've ever lived in.
And then you've been
But
very
you find it more with like walk up buildings, have it more.
Yeah, some of the older buildings, if there's like a restaurant or some kind of commercial space downstairs.
Oh, that's a good point. That's such a good point. And a lot of apartments in Manhattan are like right over restaurants or over bars.
So
That's a really good point, actually. Thank you so much for your time, Peter. This was amazing, and the information that you gave us today has been so insightful. And I think that our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this. I feel like the information that you shared with us today really just shows how much really does go into analyzing the health of a property, and really reinforces why I personally would want to use an inspector if I was to make a purchase. But also, for someone who doesn't want to, this was very helpful too, as far as teaching us what to look for and really just giving us more of an education on the different risks and what is major issue versus what's not something to really worry about. So tell me, if I have listeners or viewers here who would like to have you look at a property, where can they find you and what's the best way to reach you?
So my website has all the company's information, which is Pantec, PANTEC -engineering.com. And that has all the information to contact us.
Awesome. And I'll also provide the link for that in the description here, and I'll also put it in a visual on the video so you can get it. And then, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you saying?
My phone number is actually 347-575-2903, and my phone is always open. I have on Google that we're 24 hours.
Okay. Real inquiries only, ladies. Or maybe not. Maybe you can. Maybe you can contact Peter. He is very cute.
And then, thank you. And I would say, when getting a home inspection, definitely do your due diligence. There's a lot of people that kind of aren't that good, or people that just like want to do like a rush job, and they just want to get in and get out quickly and, just get paid. Like, you want to find somebody that's going to be thorough, and you're going to find somebody that actually will help give you some solutions to problems, and not just like give you a report with all these issues and then like say goodbye. You want somebody that could direct you in the right way, or kind of tell you like what's not that bad of an issue, what is, and kind of help you make a better decision.
Cool. That's a really good point. If someone does want to hire you for an inspection, how much notice do you need? How many days in advance should they be reaching out to you for you to be able to make it over there? Or does it not matter?
Well, the sooner, they know, the better. But I do get calls all the time where it's like, oh, we need the inspection tomorrow or the day after. And, I make it work into my schedule.
Accommodate.
One of our inspectors. So
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. This was amazing, and we really appreciate your time. And I will make sure that I post in the description the ways that the audience can get in touch with you if they have any additional questions. And guys, of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to message me directly and I can relay the question over to Peter as well. And we'll get you taken care of.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody, with your future real estate deals and transactions.
You're so adorable. Thank you so much.